There is a war. It's happening now. It will decide the fate of humanity. The time to choose sides has come. We are the resistance. We are the info war.
Welcome to the InfoWars Nightly News. It is Tuesday, September 30th, 2014, and I'm Leanne McAdoo. Here's what's coming up tonight.
Tonight, has Ebola's patient zero arrived in Dallas? Then, guess who's monitoring Twitter and Facebook? And why has the president missed over half of his daily briefings? That's next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
They're trying to say they want to run down our God, Obama, who's the puppet front man for the globalist. They're saying they want to run him down. It's so bad, ladies and gentlemen.
The CDC has confirmed today the first diagnosed Ebola case in the United States.
The bottom line here is that I have no doubt that we will control this importation or this case of Ebola so that it does not spread widely in this country. It is certainly possible that someone who had contact with this individual, a family member or other individual, could develop Ebola in the coming weeks. But there is no doubt in my mind that we will stop it here.
So the hospital says that the patient was admitted based on symptoms and, of course, his travel history, and that they've been following proper quarantine procedures as well as proper testing outlined by the CDC. But take a look at the timeline. Now, he returned to Texas from West Africa. He's here visiting family members and didn't start showing symptoms until 4 or 5 days later, but didn't start seeking treatment until the 26th. And they report that he has been isolated since the 29th. So there was a few days there where this patient is out amongst the regular people there in the hospital. Were they already putting the proper protocol in place at that point? But also, the Star Telegram is reporting that Dallas-Fort Worth Airport has no direct flights to or from Africa. So if this patient were flying, he would have had to make another connection. But they're not really concerned right now with the travel itinerary, not too concerned if other people coming from West Africa could also be exhibiting these signs of this sickness. But one thing that they do confirm is that he is here visiting his family members, and his family members have come in contact with this virus.
The patient was visiting family members and staying with family members who live in this country. We will contact anyone who we think has any likelihood of having had an exposure to the individual while they were infectious. At this point, that does not include anyone who might have traveled with him because he was not infectious at that time.
Now, this announcement of the first diagnosed case of Ebola in the United States comes just days after a German virologist announced that 5 million people would die in Ebola-infected nations within Africa. Now, despite attempts to reassure the public that there's nothing to worry about, the United States government has been preparing for an outbreak for months. We have been reporting about the inordinate amount of emergency supply requests that they have been making as well earlier this month. 160,000 hazmat suits were purchased, and the CDC is saying there's nothing to worry about. We can definitely control this virus. Don't you worry. But just a few days ago, the CDC was issuing warnings to funeral homes about how to prepare for Ebola victims. They gave a 3-page list of recommendations instructing funeral workers to wear protective gear while handling Ebola victims, as well as warning them to not carry out autopsies or to embalm corpses. And the station reporting this asks, if the outbreak of this potentially deadly virus is in West Africa, why are funeral homes in America being given guidelines? And of course, that's a great question. Once again, officials are really keen to stress that there's nothing to worry about. There's no cause for alarm. They want to keep the public, just calm and satiated here. But our big question is they've been preparing for this for months. They've ordered the hazmat suits. And just late July, the president altered the existing orders that allow him to quarantine and detain well persons, as in addition to people that might be exhibiting flu-like symptoms. So the question is, will the CDC activate emergency measures after this Ebola case has been confirmed in the United States? Now, currently, plans on the record allow for the quarantine of well persons as well as those who do not show symptoms of the virus. Now, the official CDC website details specific laws and regulations governing the control of communicable diseases. Now, under this, even healthy citizens who show no symptoms of Ebola would be forcibly quarantined at the behest of medical authorities, and quarantine is used to separate and restrict the movement of well persons who may have been exposed to a communicable disease to see if they become ill. These people may have been exposed and do not know, or they may have the disease but do not show symptoms, states the CDC. Now, last month, a former FDA official, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, wrote in Forbes that the CDC will invoke powers to hold a healthy person against his will in the event of an Ebola outbreak, and warned that the feds may assume too much jurisdiction to detain people involuntarily. Of course, this could lead to scenarios where people could be detained for long periods just on a suspicion that they might have been exposed to some pathogen and then forced to submit to certain medical interventions to gain their freedom. And this is, of course, something that we've been talking about, these mandatory experimental vaccines. Now, currently, the CDC is saying that they're not going to be detaining anyone until they begin to show symptoms. That's why they're not really concerned about other people who might have been on this flight. But here they're saying that what could be happening is that they will be quarantining and detaining people who do not show symptoms and forcing them to comply with mandatory experimental vaccines.
It's Paul Joseph Watson with Infowars.com, and the CDC has confirmed the first case of Ebola in the United States. Obviously, this is an unprecedented development. We've written articles for weeks warning that the CDC was preparing for this outcome. The 160,000 hazmat suits ordered by the US State Department, the executive order signed by Obama back at the end of July to quarantine even healthy persons who do not show symptoms of the virus, and of course CDC emergency measures which could be activated after Ebola is confirmed in the United States, which again allow for the quarantine of well persons who do not show symptoms of Ebola. And what's interesting about this recent case that's just been announced today by the CDC is they acknowledged that family members of the victim there in the Dallas hospital may also have been infected with the virus, as well as members of the community. And now we know that this victim, this Ebola victim, was active for several days with symptoms of the disease walking around the community. So the question remains, who else could have been infected? Obviously, they're going to try and downplay this for understandable reasons. They don't want to create hysteria. But obviously, a lack of detail at the moment. The key detail is that there may have been other individuals infected with the virus, as the CDC admitted. But we also had this other story today on Infowars.com, which was the CDC warning funeral homes in the United States to prepare for Ebola victims. They're advising workers in funeral homes not to perform autopsies or to embalm corpses of potential Ebola victims. So again, the CDC has been preparing for a while for this. Now they've admitted, they've confirmed today the first case of Ebola in the United States. We'll continue to track it on the Nightly News and Infowars.com. Stay tuned.
Just to reiterate, late in July, Obama updated an executive order that was already existing, allowing for the apprehension, detention, or conditional release of individuals to prevent the introduction, transmission, or spread of suspected communicable diseases. And obviously, a condition of release could be taking an experimental vaccine. Now, this is obviously a breaking story, so please stay tuned to Infowars.com for all of the updates. Now, coming up, Chevy has introduced a new car. It features some spyware upgrades. And then, will the threat of ISIS finally bring the globalists that internet censorship they've been dying for?
In the past decade, we have witnessed unparalleled scientific discoveries in the area of health. But no one has put together a formula that focuses directly on brain health, nerve growth factors, and optimizing your cellular energy at the same time. DNA Force is one of the most expensive formulas to produce. Some of the ingredients in DNA Force are $12,000 a kilogram. We are using the coveted, patented, only American source of PQQ, CoQ10, and more. You want the best that's out there at the lowest price anywhere? Well, we're bringing you a total win-win. The ultimate value, cutting-edge, trailblazing game changer that also supports the InfoWar. We have produced a limited run of DNA Force, and it will take up to 12 weeks to produce more once we sell out. Secure your DNA Force today at InfoWarsLife.com or call toll-free 888-253-3139. DNA Force from InfoWars Life.